Robert the Bruce and the War of Independence. The position towards France of Edward I made it really more desirable for him that Scotland should be independent and friendly than half subdued and hostile to his rule. While she was hostile, England, in attacking France, always left an enemy in her rear. But Edward supposed that by clemency to all the Scottish leaders except Wallace, by giving them great appointments and trusting them fully, and by calling them to his Parliament in London, he could combine England and Scotland in affectionate union. He repaired the ruins of war in Scotland. He began to study her laws and customs. He hastily ran up for her a new constitution and appointed his nephew, John of Brittany, as governor. But he had overlooked two facts. The Scottish clergy, from the highest to the lowest, were irreconcilably opposed to union with England, and the greatest and most warlike of the Scottish nobles, if not patriotic, were fickle and insatiably ambitious. It is hard to reckon how often Robert the Bruce had turned his coat, and how often the Bishop of St. Andrews had taken the oath to Edward. Both men were in Edward's favour in June 1304, but in that month they made against him a treasonable secret covenant. Through 1305, Bruce prospered in Edward's service. On February 10th, 1306, Edward was conferring on him a new favour, little guessing that Bruce, after some negotiation with his old rival, the Red Comyn, had slain him. An uncle of his was also butchered before the high altar of the Church of Greyfriars in Dumfries. Apparently, Bruce had tried to enlist Comyn in his conspiracy, and had found him recalcitrant, or feared that he would be treacherous. This sacrilegious homicide made it impossible for Bruce again to waver. He could not hope for pardon. He must be victorious or share the fate of Wallace. He summoned his adherents, including young James Douglas, received the support of the bishops of St. Andrews and Glasgow, hurried to Scone, and there was hastily crowned with a slight coronet in the presence of but 2 earls and 3 bishops. Edward made vast warlike preparations and forswore leniency, while Bruce, under papal excommunication, which he slighted, collected a few nobles such as Lennox, Athol, Errol, and a brother of the chief of the Frasers. Other chiefs, kinsmen of the slain Comyn, among them MacDowell of Argyll, banded to avenge the victim. Bruce's little force was defeated at Methven Wood near Perth by Aymer de Valence, and prisoners of all ranks were hanged as traitors, while 2 bishops were placed in irons. Bruce looked to the heather, pursued by the MacDowells no less than by the English. His queen was captured. His brother Nigel was executed. He cut his way to the wild west coast, aided only by Sir Niall Campbell of Lochawe, who thus founded the fortune of his house, and by the MacDonalds under Angus Og of Islay. He wintered in the Isle of Rathlin. Some even think he went to Norway, and in spring, after surprising the English garrison in his own castle of Turnberry, he roamed, now lonely, now with a mobile little force in Galloway, always evading and sometimes defeating his English pursuers. At Loch Trull and at London Hill he dealt them heavy blows, while on June 7th, 1307, his great enemy Edward died at Burghs-on-Sands, leaving the crown and the war to the weakling Edward II. Fortune had turned. We cannot follow Bruce through his campaign in the north, where he ruined the country of the Commons, and through the victories in Galloway of his hard-fighting brother Edward. With enemies on every side, Bruce took them in detail. Early in March 1309, he routed the MacDowells at the west end of the Pass of Brander. Edward II was involved in disputes with his own barons, and Bruce was recognised by his country's church in 1310, and aided by his great lieutenants, Sir James Douglas and Thomas Randolph, Earl of Murray. By August 1311, Bruce was carrying the war into England, sacking Durham and Chester, failing at Carlisle, but in January 1313, capturing Perth. In summer, Edward Bruce, in the spirit of chivalry, gave to Stirling Castle a set day, Midsummer Day, 1314, to be relieved or to surrender, and Bruce kept tryst with Edward II and his English and Irish levies, and all his adventurous chivalry from France. All the world knows the story of the first battle, the Scottish Quatre Bras, the success of Randolph on the right, the slaying of Bohun when Bruce broke his battle-axe. Next day, Bruce's position was strong. Beneath the towers of Stirling, the Bannockburn protected his front. Morasses only to be crossed by narrow paths impeded the English advance. Edward Bruce commanded the right wing, Randolph the centre, Douglas and the steward the left, Bruce the reserve, the Islesmen. His strength lay in his spearmen's dark, impenetrable wood. His archers were ill-trained. Of horse he had but a handful under Keith, the Mareschal, but the heavy English cavalry could not break the squares of spears. Keith cut up the archers of England. The main body could not deploy, and the slow, relentless advance of the whole Scottish line covered the plain with the dying and the flying. A panic arose, caused by the sight of an unapproving cloud of camp followers on the Gillies Hill. Edward fled, and hundreds of noble prisoners, with all the wagons and supplies of England, fell into the hands of the Scots. In 8 strenuous years, the generalship of Bruce and his war leaders, the resolution of the people, hardened by the cruelties of Edward, the sermons of the clergy, and the utter incompetence of Edward II, had redeemed a desperate chance. From a fief of England, Scotland had become an indomitable nation. Bruce continued to prosper, despite an ill-advised attempt to win Ireland, in which Edward Bruce fell. This left the succession, if Bruce had no male issue, to the children of his daughter, Marjorie, and her husband, the steward. In 1318, Scotland recovered Berwick. In 1319, routed the English at Mytton-on-Swale. In a parliament at Aberbrothok, the Scots announced to the Pope, who had been interfering, that, while 100 of them survive, they will never yield to England. In October 1322, Bruce utterly routed the English at Byland Abbey, in the heart of Yorkshire, and chased Edward II into York. In March 1324, a son was born to Bruce named David. On May 4, 1328, by the Treaty of Northampton, the independence of Scotland was recognised. In July, the infant David married Joanna, daughter of Edward II. On June 1329, Bruce died and was buried at Dunfermline. His heart, by his order, was carried by Douglas towards the Holy Land, and when Douglas fell in a battle with the Moors in Spain, the heart was brought back by Sir Simon Lockhart of the Lee. The later career of Bruce, after he had been excommunicated, is that of the foremost knight and most sagacious man of action who ever wore the crown of Scotland. The staunchness with which the clergy and estates disregarded papal fulminations indicated a kind of Protestant tendency to independence of the Holy See. Bruce's inclusion of representatives of the boroughs in the first regular Scottish Parliament was a great step forward in the constitutional existence of the country.